In this video, I'm going to talk to you about sex, contraception, homosexuality, and then I'm going to throw cohabitation in at the end. So, when it comes to Catholic views on sex, the first one is they believe it should take place within marriage. You can speak about the three purposes of sex, okay? It's to bond the married couple, open to procreation, and for pleasure, okay? That to fulfill all three of them, got to be in marriage, okay? You can think that's the idea of it being like an emotional act and all that sort of stuff as well, but there's your sort of straightforward part of it. Then they believe that what's called sex is unitive, okay? It's when man and woman become one flesh, okay? So, that sort of idea of them becoming one, the reason this should then therefore should take place in a marriage, you could say, right? Because it is not the idea that you become one and then you go and become one with somebody else and one with somebody else and one with somebody else, that it's supposed to be sort of exclusive and loving and within sort of just within a marriage, really, okay? The next one is they believe, what's called their views on sex before marriage. They believe it can lead to promiscuity. So essentially, if you are lowering or lessening the what's called the importance of sex and just sort of turn into a physical act, then the impact of that is that it could be that you have sex with multiple people. And this goes against the teaching to flee from sexual immorality, okay? And also that it's sort of, we're not treating our bodies with respect, and we should be because we're all vessels of the Holy Spirit. Sexual act was called that adultery is seen as sinful and wrong. It breaks one of the 10 commandments, okay? So you can say something about that. You can say that sex outside of marriage when a person has been legally divorced is sinful. And the reason for that is that this is seen as adultery, okay? Because they made vows till death do us part. Okay, so you can say that you can say that sort of view on sex there. Say about same-sex relationships are wrong, okay, or sinful. Why? Because they don't fulfill the three purposes of sex. Then to give a bit of variety, you can say about you can mention about what's called contraception here. All right, that you can say about that Catholics are against the use of artificial contraception when it comes to sex, and the reason for this is that it breaks the three purposes of sex. So they would encourage Catholics to not take the pill, to not use condoms, that sort of stuff, for it to take place in marriage. Next point is that you can say that Catholic Church are okay with being in favour of natural contraception. And the reason for this is that it's using God-given things to ensure that that sex can take place, okay, and that whilst the three purposes of sex are to be open to procreation, it doesn't mean that every time a Catholic has sex, the intention is to have a child, okay? So they support things like NFP and the withdrawal method, okay? If you want to throw in like a little bit of sort of variety about sort of like liberal Catholic view, that some liberal Catholics, they sort of ignore the teachings, and some of them cohabit, some of them use artificial contraception, okay? And the reason for that is that some of them think that you can separate the three purposes of sex, and you could say that some liberal Catholics might argue that they talk about it being sort of they ignore the teaching. But this is kind of coming in now to the alternative. So if you could ask Catholic views on sex are wrong, you could use all the stuff about them not being wrong, what I just said there. And when it comes to the alternative, okay, about why their views are wrong, you can say that liberal Catholics and their views on cohabitation, that they think it can be okay and separate the three purposes. You can also say that what's called the fact that many Catholics ignore the Catholic Church and teaching on sex, okay? We're almost, what's called in a recent survey, in a newspaper called The Tablet, which would be great if you can remember that, all right, that 50% of Catholics between 18 and 45 have admitted to using artificial contraception. So if Catholics can't stick to it, then does it suggest that anybody else supposed to stick to it, so therefore the views are wrong? You could also say that Catholic views on same-sex relationships are unrealistic, and what they say is that because they say that homosexuality is okay, it's homosexual sex where the issue sort of comes, that you could say, well, this is unrealistic to expect someone to be in a homosexual relationship and to not complete that relationship, if you want, by not having sexual intercourse is unrealistic to have that view, and it doesn't fit with today's society or with same-sex relationships. So that's Catholic views on sex. You could also mention, that their views on divorce, sex after divorce, it was called wrong, and the reason for that is that you can say that legally they're no longer together, so therefore if someone has sex after divorce, then it is an adultery thing, so you could say that being an issue there. And also the views on artificial contraception could be considered wrong / not Christian, so you could say about that it's considered love thy neighbour. Do you mean if you use contraception to prevent the spread of disease? So you could build an idea around that as well. Now, when it comes to contraception, so you've got on here, right, the sort of the Catholic view on it. So first of all, Catholics are against the use of artificial contraception. It intentionally tries to stop the three purposes of sex, or to deny two of them. The next one is that they are against the use of artificial contraception because it can lead to sexual immorality. So if you take away the threat, if you want for a better phrase, right, the threat that somebody could become pregnant, then suggest you could just turn this into a physical act and somebody could have sex with a variety of people without having to set up a long-term relationship with them, because there's no fear of sort of pregnancy, so therefore people have sex with multiple people, which breaks obviously the teaching, flee from sexual immorality, and also the fact that we are vessels of the Holy Spirit. That kind of leads on to my next point as well. Catholics are against the use of artificial contraception because it means people are not treating their bodies with respect. And the reason for this is that if you are sleeping with multiple people again, okay, or if you are just sort of thinking of it as being an emotional, physical act and not an emotional one, then you are not sort of fulfilling sort of God's intention when it comes to sex, okay? And you can say that it's not just a physical act because we're made up of body and soul, okay? And if we are going to be having sex with someone, then it is not just a physical act, but it is a spiritual and emotional one as well, okay? And that's sort of like the spiritual side of it and the emotional side of it comes from God, okay? You can say about the fact that we are vessels of the Holy Spirit, and therefore artificial contraception leads to this kind of relationship, and therefore it often leads to sort of sin, if you want. Then you can throw in about how Catholics support the use of natural contraception. Essentially, what God gave to Catholics is being used to ensure that they're open to the three purposes of sex, and not sort of deny it. So you can link that to the idea of NFP and the withdrawal method, that sort of thing. Now, when it comes to you can put in now, right, about the liberal Catholic view. People sort of ignore the official teachings of the Church. And you can also use these as the alternative in an evaluation question. So here's the one you can say. Liberal Catholics, some of them support the use of artificial contraception, and the reason for this is that they think that they can sort of support love thy neighbour, and the reason for this is that it can stop unwanted pregnancies, it can stop the spread of disease, that sort of stuff, and you could say that actually is a loving action. You could also say the fact that some liberal Catholics ignore the Catholic teaching, with up to 50% of them, all right, between 18 and 45 in the survey by the tablet, saying that they have used artificial contraception. And you could say that the reason for that is they believe you could separate the three purposes of sex, okay? Now, if you want to throw in sort of like a bit of a non-religious idea or just a societal sort of idea when it comes to contraception, you can say that it's legal, so it should be allowed. You can also say that the fact that it's very sort of common, say Catholic Church's view on it is sort of trying to close the gate once the horse is bolted. Do you mean that contraception is a feature of today's society, the sort of the use of it, of artificial contraception I'm talking about here, and that the Catholic Church's view on it is outdated as a result. Okay, final sort of thing when it comes to sort of sex, if you want, or for this topic, about contraception, you could be asked to describe Catholic beliefs on natural contraception. And if that's the case, you say about the fact that they agree with it, and you can say the fact that when God made everything, and that includes sex, okay, he said, he described it as being good, okay, so therefore you can say that it's good, right? So natural contraception is fine. They believe, okay, that it was called that using natural contraception is responsible parenthood, and the reason for this is that they believe that obviously there is sometimes the wrong time to fall pregnant. Do you mean it could be that you don't have much money, or that the child could have, do you mean, or that there could be medical issues in the family? It could be just a stressful time, right? And if that's the case, then not sort of intending to procreate but still continue to have sex is acceptable. Third point is that the church supports natural family planning. So the idea of this is basing sort of sexual activity within a marriage around sort of like the menstruational cycle, all right, looking at sort of the least fertile times of the month, what's called that with the couple would have sex, but at the same time then avoiding sort of times, or maybe abstinence would be a good word to use here, that they would abstain from having sex during times when the woman is most fertile. And then you throw in at the end that the church rejects artificial contraception. So, homosexuality. When it comes to the sort of Catholic views on homosexuality, I think this topic is really straightforward. They believe that being a homosexual is not a sin, okay? We've all been made in the image and likeness of God, so therefore, do you mean like that people that should be open to the fact they should accept homosexuals and they're part of sort of like God's mission and accepted into the church? What they do also believe, though, is that Catholics believe that homosexual sex is a sin. And this is because it breaks the three purposes of sex, okay? And it also breaks the teaching a man should not lie with another man as he would a woman, okay? So they would say that when it comes to this, all right, that they may pray for homosexuals to sort of be celibate and encourage them to be so, to abstain from sex. Catholics believe that homophobia, though, is sinful and unacceptable. They believe that all types of discrimination must be curbed or eradicated, as they're not in line with sort of God's plan. So what they would do is that the Catholics would support doing anti-homophobia sort of laws, whether to stop this type of thing, and they would challenge people with homophobic views. The other thing you say then, though, okay, is your sort of fifth point. Okay, oh no, sorry, I haven't mentioned, about how Catholics understand not having sex for homosexuals is difficult, so therefore they try to support them. And the reason for this is that they're trying to help them to avoid being sinful. So the type of things that they do is they pray for them. They may hold sort of like services that encourage homosexuals to remain celibate, that sort of stuff, okay? The fifth point, if it comes up as a describe, you can say that some other Christians, and you could use this sort of thing for the alternative view when it comes to homosexuality, that some other Christians disagree with the Catholic stance on homosexuality and believe that they should be allowed to have sex. And the reason for this is that they believe that you can separate the three purposes of sex. So you can talk about the Church of England, okay? The Church of England and many other Christian churches, that they say that a same-sex relationship can be okay, because actually engaging in and having a full relationship with somebody else can actually give you sort of the support and love needed to be able to go out and to serve God, okay? Obviously you wouldn't say that they're okay with do you mean that having multiple partners, that type of thing, in the same way they wouldn't with heterosexual people, okay? The alternative then to the Catholic views, you can say that they're outdated because it's legal for people to be homosexual, that sort of thing, all right? You can also say that the Catholic view is homophobic, and some people might consider it to be that. And the reason for that is that you would say that they are unrealistic if you want to say that, okay, they're part of the church, but they can't have sex. It sort of implies, there's an implication that what they're doing is unacceptable. Now, when it comes to sort of the final view, you could be asked to explain the Catholic Church's view on cohabitation. Right, so cohabitation is living together and having sex before marriage, all right, in sort of a long-term relationship. Now, straight away, they're against it. And the reason one is that it's like a challenge to marriage, okay? So they think it damages the institutional purpose of marriage. And the reason for this is that it provides an alternative that, where some people might see sort of like the things that are supposed to be just happening within marriage, sort of like the benefits, if you want, right? That things like sex and being with that one person, that it sort of takes that away, that special thing from marriage is being stolen, if you want, right? So they believe that it's a threat, if you want, to the institution of marriage. It also stops the couple having God support, so whilst they're together and they support each other, without taking the vows, they haven't had the sacrament, so God isn't part of their relationship. They believe that it is usually sinful, okay? And the reason for that is that if they are cohabiting and engaged in sexual activity, and therefore they are denying the three purposes of sex, okay? what he would say is that that Catholics fear that children born into this environment might not receive the same what's called level of love and support. And the reason for that is that if you are cohabiting, it makes it not more likely that you're going to break up, but there's sort of like less, you haven't vowed to one another to sort of be together, and without those promises, it might mean that you are more susceptible. Okay, there's more chance that you could actually sort of break up. And what's called that, there's sort of your 4 points, if you want, right, that you would use. What you could say for the describe is that you could say that one form is civil partnership when it comes to lots of same-sex relationships, and therefore they would be against it.